Hi, and welcome, Freedom Warriors, to Essential Podcast, where you stay for the conversation and you leave empowered. This is episode number 8. We have Katherine Letsios on, and I'm your host, Jamie Russo, with the two lovely hosts, Kimberly and Jessica. So take it away, Kimberly. Let's do an intro here that's justified, or justice, sorry.
Yeah, I want to say that I've been, seeing and hearing snippets of this for months now. And this has got to be one of the biggest medical scandals to date that I know of. From the cover ups, the lies, the malpractice, the lack of informed consent, and the fact that doctors were taking. Um, their names off of files and the reports of this woman. And I just want to say, Catherine, thank you so much for speaking up about this, being brave, being courageous, using your voice, and letting this all come to fruition. We have listened to two of your other podcasts with Kristen and Eric, and our hearts break for your story. And we just want to welcome you to be completely transparent here with us and take it away and give us a little bit of background in regards to your medical sick care story and journey.
Um, so my name is Catherine. Last name is Letsios, like Jamie introduced. I'm 43. I live in Mississauga in Ontario. And my journey began I know now that I was sick from 2016 forward just because I pulled, 5 years of medical files, and functional medicine doctors like to go through that thoroughly. But um in and around when our pandemic was announced and it started, I got really sick really fast. And I've seen firsthand in these hospitals, I'm just going to put this out there right now, just absolutely how conflicting what I was experiencing and seeing actually was compared to what was being televised, right? Um, Aside from that, there was there was a plethora of tests that were done, and my journey starts at Credit Valley. And when I had gone in there through Emerge, I was absolutely terrified to even enter the hospital at that point. And I was experiencing extreme hemorrhaging. At this point, for 6 months, I had already been covered with unexplainable bruises. And they immediately at Emerge told me that they would give me a referral to internal medicine in person. And this was in and around February, March of 2020. And after that, I met with my internal medicine doctor. She ordered some tests, CT scans, etc. And what occurred was all the reports said that everything was absolutely fine. And there was certain language used in these reports that for me was a red flag, like left kidney poorly visualized, right? Or none of them would mention my cervix. So she literally said to me that she's not sure if she could actually find a overall cause for all of this. In and out of Emerge with that specific hospital, I actually had nurses tell me, have you thought about seeing a naturopathic doctor? They can do wonders for your organs, or, we're under directives. And that prompted me to start looking deeper into things. Why would she say this to me? It's almost like she was wanting to help me, but their hands were tied, right? From like administration or higher ups. So I went through that process, and, I ended up with a referral for a urologist for the bladder issues. I ended up with a referral for a gynecologist for the hemorrhaging. I ended up with a referral for a neurologist. At this point, you know, everything was just coming back like it was absolutely normal and everything was fine. But what I did start to notice when I looked collectively at all of my reports was nobody would mention my cervix, almost like I didn't have one. They would mention other organs and say that, they looked fine or that they were unremarkable. So I went through this for about a month or two. And, you know, my family doctor at the time wasn't the best, but she was what she was. And I had pulled my records and I was seeing, alternative integrated medicine also simultaneously. And what they were able to notice was that there was signs from 2016, right? Like when your D dimer is elevated to almost 3,000 and that number should be below 500, and that symbolizes serious problems, right? So, having noticed these things, I approached her and I said, I think we might have missed something. Like, not in an accusatory way or whatnot. And she literally said, well, if you don't trust me, I guess I can't be your doctor anymore. So she dropped me from her care, literally, in the middle of a pandemic. Mind you, before this all happened, she was just minimalizing a plethora of symptoms leading up to this point in time. So I made the decision to start researching if it was possible to go out of country, even though they were telling us when it was televised that you can't do this and you can't cross the border. So what I ended up doing was getting by appointment, my passport renewed within an hour. I only had to show proof that I had booked a medical procedure on the other side of the border, drove across no problems, came back here after my MRI there, and I did some blood work and other things there as well. And I came back here. I quarantined for 2 weeks as they said I had to. And in all honesty, I had to do that just in order to be able to meet up with my medical team at Credit Valley again. And I basically threw down my Buffalo MRI. And I said, I have a hemorrhagic cyst on my left ovary that's like not supposed to be that way. There is a cluster of 10, cysts inside my cervix. None of your tests here caught that, like internal ultrasound, external ultrasound, CT scan, pelvic, abdominal with contrast. None of it picked it up here. But yet I go across the border and it comes back this way. At this time, I was in a meeting in person at Credit Valley, and there was my internal medicine doctor, the manager. This is where I knew something was up. They brought in the manager of all 3 Trillium sites in person to my meeting. I had an advocate on the phone because self-advocacy is not very efficient when you're your only voice. And she literally looked at my report and said to me that if she didn't even address me, actually she addressed the person on the phone, so basically didn't even address me. And she said something along the lines of, if I want to go and do tests outside of the country, that perhaps I should get treatment outside the country. And I just looked at her. I remember saying, like, I'm not looking for treatment. I don't want a biopsy. I don't want surgery. I wouldn't go that route anyways, but you guys are purposely intentionally delaying diagnosis. So the meeting ended abruptly. And in the week that followed, subsequently, every one of my specialists at this hospital literally dropped me from their care, like all of them. So now what do you do, right? And you're continuing to just get weaker and sicker, and the weight loss that was happening. And I ended up having a girlfriend of mine who I know personally and professionally. She's an osteopath practitioner. And she took me to a new functional medicine doctor in Woodbridge. And at that point, what they do is they literally look over everything, like every report, every image. They pulled like 5 years, like I said, and went over everything. And she immediately had ordered nuclear medicine and ultrasounds for all the lumps. Now, my ultrasound reports came back stating that they were possible lipomas. The word possible, again, is thrown in there intentionally. And I've seen it on many patients, and then they get diagnosed way later. It's almost like it's word magic that they use. So I ended up going and doing those tests. And she said, screw Credit Valley and Trillium. I'm going to put you through to UHN. So she gives me a referral for a brand new team of medical, internal medicine at Toronto Western, thinking that maybe these suburban hospitals just can't figure it out. And, if you go to a more renowned hospital, they might be able to help you. I went through a lot of gaslighting there. They basically ran the clock out on my life. They said it could possibly be neurological. And I'm like, I have organic evidence, pictures, timestamped. You can't fake this. My blood work, like from months ago at Credit Valley, was off the charts. Like my liver function, um, the urine with blood in it, everything that they did. And they basically backed the other hospital. So they threw me to neurology, and the neurology department cleared me. I remember driving home from Toronto Western, getting out of my dress clothes, and I was literally walking up the stairs. And I was walking up the steps, and my right leg snapped, like on second step from the bottom. It's not like I tumbled or I fell like from a roof hanging Christmas lights. And I ended up breaking my leg in two places. So I didn't want to go back to Credit Valley. And I remember instructing the people in the house, you need to drive me to Oakville. We got to try like another city. Maybe it won't follow me. Obviously, when you've been blacklisted, you can feel it, your intuition. You had enough evidence of conflicting reports now and omissions from our Canadian reports to our American reports. So we just thought there would be a clean slate. Well, I end up in the hospital there, and there was a lot of gaslighting. There was a lot of like, it just didn't feel right. So I had my osteopath literally advocating for me on every phone appointment or in person during my 3-day stay there. And collectively with the surgeon, once he realized, the orthopedic surgeon, how much more investigations were still pending and the complex, you know, like the complexity of the medical case, I feel like he didn't feel comfortable. So we decided collectively, because all the other things happening systemically, to go non-operative route. This is what he said. So I allowed them to put a cast on. They put the cast on to above my thigh, like almost to my bikini area. And um, while I was in there, a nurse handed me my medical chart. We're talking a leather binder with doctor's notes, like in wet pen. Like, it's not like when you order your records from the hospital and they're able to, tidy it up and edit it and then polish it and email it to you after you pay a fee. This was unedited, raw doctor's notes. And it frightened me, and I don't scare easily, what I seen written in there. There was one page where it said multiple lawsuits pending with other hospitals. Like, why would you write that in there, right? Or my social status, or what I did for a living. Possible delusional. Like, you could tell they were building a nefarious case to discredit the patient at that point. So what I did is I photographed all 52 pages, and then I rang the bell. I recorded every conversation from there forward with any and all medical staff. And you can hear in one of my audio clips where I'm saying to her, you know what, you need to bring me the charge nurse, and I'm signing myself out. There's nothing more you're going to do. You're refusing to work me up. You're literally looking at my arm, I had like dark black bruises that were at least a week before my leg broke, all down this arm. And they just said, well, that was there before your leg broke. You're only here for this. And I was like, oh, wow, is the patient not a whole patient, like top to bottom? So I started to see what was happening. I felt very unsafe for good reasons. So I left the hospital. This is now on the 23rd of November, 3 days later. I'm outside the hospital trying to get into the vehicle to go home. And in standing position, my left leg snaps. And it snapped in two different places again, this time worse than the one where I was walking up the stairs. So, of course, right back into the same hospital that just done me dirty, I had to go. And it was broken so much worse that they had to do conscious sedation. My friend came again to the hospital in person, and I said, I'm not doing this procedure if she's not allowed to stay in the room. She films part of it until they caught on, and then at that point, they asked her to stop filming. I was completely messed up because they had to medicate you in order to set that bone. So now I'm sitting there with two casts on. I'm unable to breathe on the left side of my lung, and you're scared because of, COVID, that you don't want to say you can't breathe. But on day 5, I finally said, I'm finding it very difficult to breathe. It's almost like I'm in my car with no AC. I advocated so hard for 5 days, they were refusing to see. So my functional medicine doctor was able to pull my blood work from that hospital because their internal system, OLIS, allows her to do that. And she emailed it to me. Now, I know how to read my blood labs, and they knew that, which is why they withheld some of that blood work, because what they gave me as an inpatient and what she was able to pull did not even look the same. So I rang my bell and I said, I need to speak right now with the manager of this hospital. I am not dealing with a charge nurse. This is not okay. So she came bedside and I said to her, I can't breathe on the left side of my lung only, and I have 4 broken bones. My blood work shows that my D-dimer is elevated. You withheld that. Also, at the same time, my hemoglobin had dropped extensively, borderline where you would need a blood transfusion, but we couldn't understand where the bleeding was from. So I also told her, I showed her on my iPhone, I said, also, there were some things that are highly illegal, if not major procedural violations written on my medical chart, and I have photographed them. And I have sent them off to family and loved ones in case something happens. So there are other people now that have this. I want you to be aware. So she takes my phone and looks at what I have. This whole time you're in there and you're in there terrified. And she proceeds to bargain with me. Um, Along the lines of, what could I do to make you feel safer? I said, well, until I sign out of this hospital, I'd like my best friend to come and stay. She goes, that's not a problem. I'll clear it with security. She can stay night and day next to you. This was when nobody was allowed to go visit their loved ones. She ordered the CT scan immediately for my lung, which did show I had a pulmonary embolism on my left lower lung. Like, what if I hadn't pushed that hard? So long story short, I left the hospital. What happened next was 3 consecutive fracture clinic appointments.
Can I interject
And
in just a
absolutely,
moment?
Jamie, absolutely.
The one thing that I want to point out to everybody that's listening. So basically what you're saying is you've gone through your entire file, you've looked at a setup that they put against you, you are injured, sedated, and you're at their mercy. So I'm pointing out to anyone that's listening just how terrifying that would be, being in that situation, knowing that you're with individuals that are kind of painting you into a corner, doing really bizarre, heinous things with your file, and you're at their mercy. So
Mm-hmm.
thank God you had your friend there. Thank God.
I'm so thankful to her. Like, she's advocated so hard. Like, literally written to, and I have every email. One specific mainstream media reporter, I know now it was arbitrary, but when you're cycling through that kind of trauma, fear, and you're that sick, like today, I've 30% healed myself. I'm not the same person I was January when Kim first heard of my story, and at that time, you're so sick, you can't breathe. Literally, my lung was filling up with blood. What if I hadn't pushed and showed her the evidence I had? I don't think they would have done that test, right? So there's a point where I just said, okay, well, I have 2 casts on. What am I going to do? You guys can't not give me a diagnosis. Like, 1 month ago, I had a nuclear medicine bone scan head to toe. And you guys said on the report everything was normal. If my bone scan was normal, how 4 weeks later do I break 4 bones 3 days apart? I'm not 90, right? Like, there's got to be an error. Throw your radiologist under the bus. I don't care what you guys need to do, but you can't do this to somebody. So long story short, a lot of negotiating. I've spoken, like, they brought in their legal risk and assessment team to speak to me. So I knew that I had them where I needed to have them to be able to maintain a level of safety for myself. At the same time, though, I will add that when my family doctor dropped me, Jamie, when she dropped me, she wrote on my medical chart, and I have copies of this, that Catherine is very court savvy. Catherine has a lot of friends and former clients that are doctors and nurses. And Catherine believes that something sinister and occult is occurring verbatim. Like, I have memorized this. And like, it came to me when you go to find a new family doctor, you often pull your old records. And it was literally in black and white. So I caught on real quick that the hospitals were reading this, right? So, and it became evident to me what was happening. And I'm like, okay, So they did make me do one COVID test. I've only done one in my life because we weren't sure if I would need surgery or not. And they were stalling on my reports for this specific result. So they didn't realize that I had a powerful functional medicine doctor. She's one of few in Canada. She's not just functional medicine. She's an MD, the kind that have a prescription pad, can order tests and images, have shit reread, right? So, and I also had my girlfriend advocating, writing to reporter after reporter. We know now why they wouldn't cover a story like this. And so I was laying there, and they let my best friend stay until it was time to leave. But when I finished and I was out of that hospital, it was, I think, the 25th of November, 26th. So I had 3 consecutive fracture clinic appointments with their orthopedic surgeon through Oakville, right? But outpatient. So what ended up happening was, sorry about that. What ended up happening was my friend, who's an osteopath, couldn't get away from her clinic. So she had her husband drive me because we had caught on what they were doing at this point. And he recorded every single appointment where you can hear the orthopedic surgeon telling me everything looks fine. The bones are healing fine. We shouldn't change the cast, even though it's 3 weeks later and they're loose now, because we might lose the progress, right? And you can hear language like this. In the interim, I forgot. I just want to add in one thing. Before I left Oakville Hospital, my functional medicine doctor wrote an urgent fax to internal medicine over at Toronto Western, literally calling out the doctors in Oakville, making sure that this is part of my health record should something happen to me. And she's begging them in capital letters in some sentences, please, like, I asked you guys to reassess my patient. Where the lumps were ultrasounded months ago is exactly where the bones broke. They're not willing to work her up and diagnose because apparently UHN started her workup. She's under the care of Dr. So-and-so in Oakville. Her D-dimer level is elevated. She's, can you call your colleagues there and see if you can collaborate them to help diagnose and work up my patient? Nothing came of it. They just wanted nothing to do with me at Oakville. They wouldn't even do a bone density test. I had to go with 2 casts on above the knee, almost to my bikini area, outpatient, in excessive pain to do these tests. So I ended up going through that process, and then they broke for Christmas break. So I started doing heavy research with a lot of people helping me on the back, like in the back scenes. So we discover that, like, first of all, I was already a leper to them. How dare I travel in the middle of a pandemic to go to the States to prove what was wrong and that they were omitting here? So I'm like, okay, where in Canada right now is there not a lockdown? Where could I go where they don't have biopsies and diagnostic stuff, deferred because of directives? So the Atlantic bubble, right? But it wasn't easy. There's only 3 criteria you could make it in there. One was for, like, if you were a student coming back from school. The other one was if it was for employment. And lastly, if it was compassionate care and family care, which I definitely qualified for. So I had my uncle and aunt that is there ask me to go that way. They're not uncle and aunt by blood, but their family's like family to me. So they ended up getting me into PEI. Again, I did my mandatory, 2-week quarantine. I did a lot of research, and I ended up going into the hospital. I even made sure to show continuancy of care, that my functional medicine doctor from here in Ontario gave me a referral for a fracture clinic there, just so it didn't look like I was, putting myself at risk or running away from medical care. I crossed all my T's and dotted my I's because I had researched it thoroughly. And I knew that the internal system called Ontario Clinic Connect, they can't access it from there. Like in Ontario, no matter where you go, the hospitals can all connect internally, like their systems. So I ended up going there, and I took all my medical records and all of my discs. Like I actually had, like, from every examination, I had my silver, like, soft copy discs, x-rays, CT scans, MRIs, everything. I brought it with me. I also made sure I made copies and left them back here safe with people I trusted. So I went there carte blanche. It should have been, right? So I go in there, and the first doctor that does x-rays says to me, we're like, this is right after Christmas. And he says to me, when did you say this happened? I said November 20th and 23rd, respectively. And he says, because it looks like they just broke yesterday. Like there's no healing going on. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like that part floored me, because I had 3 weeks in a row where my orthopedic surgeon back here was telling me everything looked like it was healing fine. But I didn't tell them this. I just kept it. But the thought, like immediately that red flag. So I realize now that I have one shot at this. So I asked them, I said, well, why would this be happening? And they said, why did you choose to go the non-operative route? With 4 spiral fractures to this extent, it's very rare a surgeon will decide to do it non-operatively. So I told them, I said, my surgeon there said everything was healing fine. And because there was no diagnosis as to why it happened in the first place, they didn't want to work me up. So, I came here anyways because I can't drive and I'm like completely like on my own. So I thought I would, get medical care while I'm here to be responsible. So at that point, they agreed to admit me under the pretense that they would work me up, that they would give me a unified answer as to what was going on so that we could proceed and figure out what the next steps would be, just to get me to admit myself. Once I was in that hospital, I knew I was in really big trouble because there was no workup. Like cardiology workup should consist of like, your heart ultrasound, your heart blood work, your heart, like ECG, the whole nine. They did an ECG, which only measures your sinus rhythm. That's it. That's all. And the orthopedic surgeon came in and they had a completely different surgical plan than what I heard in Ontario. So I had a loved one on speakerphone just to help me navigate it and to bear witness. And we asked him together if, her bones broke because of cancer, do her risk factors change for the surgery? Because in order for the patient to make an informed decision, there has to be full medical transparency. And you cannot accurately give me my risk factors to do the surgery here unless you tell me why it broke in the first place. So they were stunned that we knew how to speak this way. And they basically said that we would reconvene the next day. At this point, it pivoted, it pivoted really quick, where they started coming in my room 2 at a time. They did a CT scan head to toe and asked me why I would lie about having a pulmonary embolism. I'm like, I didn't lie. I have a prescription from a surgeon and a hematologist at Oakville Hospital. This is what they told me. You're telling me that you see nodules on my lungs. They called it a pulmonary embolism. I'm not surprised. Nothing has been the same across the whole board for me. And having said that, he kind of like was very arrogant, like, who am I to talk to them this way? They asked me if I had background in medicine. Was I a nurse at this point? Because I wasn't about to stroke their egos. I wasn't. I was exhausted. I knew I was very sick. There was a lot of gaslighting. This is not in my head the way that they do to me and many other patients. So at that point, they told me, I said to them, I have 2 conflicting surgical opinions. I have the right to go back home to Ontario so that I can make a decision, right? Because I have 2 completely opposite orthopedic like recommendations right now from a surgical point of view. At that point, they told me I wasn't allowed to leave. I'm like, what do you mean I can't leave? And the nurse said that the doctor has placed me on a form. I'm like, what do you mean on a form? So I immediately knew what was happening. I have heard of this happening. I've seen it before. And I looked at my uncle who was sitting in the room and I said to him, I'm going to type out a template and I need you to shoot this out to every news channel that you could possibly think of, knowing that they're not going to run my story, but at least they're going to call the PR department of the hospital to fact check. And he said to me, why is it that you can't? I said, because I need to get on the phone with a friend that, is able to help me legally, in Ontario. So he did that to CBC Nova Scotia, CBC Toronto, CBC Halifax, because at this point I figured it out. You're just running the clock out on me, and that's that. So they brought the charges to my bed. All of this I have audio recordings of. And I literally looked at her and I said, you cannot execute a mental health form 1A. You can't under the Mental Health Act of Canada if your patient is not suicidal or a harm to others. Clearly, I'm not suicidal because I just came halfway across the country to fight for my life. So you need to give me a hard copy within 1 hour so I can contact an attorney. And she proceeds to tell me that she's not sure if she can give me the paper or a copy of the paper, but she'll inquire if they can read me, like the reasons that were listed. And at that point, like a few hours passed by, I spoke to a friend in Ontario. I called Human Rights, and she came back and proceeds to tell me that she asked me what what I do for a living and what my background is. They asked me why I came there. I said, to your hospital or to your province? Which is it? Because at this point, they're screwing with you. And I was so livid that they even tried to go this avenue because I know I have.
Oh, I think she muted us by accident.
She cut out. You cut out, Catherine. We can't hear you. Nope, we can't hear you still.
No. No.
Okay, we're reading that your mic isn't connected. Is your mic in your headphones?
Hello?
Oh, there we go. Yes.
Oh, okay.
So one thing I want to ask while we kind of pause there. Well, you froze now. I'll ask the question anyways in case you can hear us, in case you come back on. How long was it that they contained you within the room and telling you that you couldn't leave is what my question is going to be. Apparently we're in technical difficulties. It's great that we have all this technology and it works wonderfully until it doesn't.
So, yeah. We'll give it another moment here and kind of see if we can get her back connected. It might just be something with her connection. So she might just need a quick moment here just to kind of
relog in.
Yes.
What an incredible story. What an incredible story. It's an eye-opener for many individuals out there. There are quite a few people that do go through similar things. Just incredible. It's mind-blowing all at the same time.
Yes, absolutely. And especially this story too. I just the fact that this was all done to her, and it really does seem as though there was, well, and at certain points, a coordinated effort, but also it makes you really wonder with if this would have happened in this kind of way if it hadn't been the pandemic, because she had said in a previous Spotify interview that doctors were given some kind of doctors and nurses some kind of like a liability. No, I wouldn't say get out of jail free card type thing, but things weren't going to be scrutinized as high as they would have been. And so yeah, now at this point, it's like were they trying to encourage people to pass faster to up their numbers? Like, is this just part of this whole medical pretty much apartheid that we'd seen now we're just seeing the almost, not the full unleashing, I won't say that just yet, but the beginnings of. And so, yeah, absolutely. This is
Yep.
a horrible experience.
I think what's happening through the pandemic is we got rid of a lot of the background noise within the hospitals. So people are actually seeing it a little more clear. I have had personal experiences with some people in my past where we've gone into the hospital, and a lot of people are unaware that how linked your medical history is with your health card. So I know two different individuals where we have gone in, and what happens is they blackball them. So they'll say that it's something mental. One person I was going to the hospital with had heart palpitations and murmurs or whatever, and they were trying to get it checked out. They diagnosed her with anxiety. So it didn't matter what hospital we went in to try and get tests done. It was anxiety the whole way. A naturopath actually found something wrong with her heart. So what I'm pointing out is just how that links across. It doesn't matter where you are in Ontario. As soon as they swipe that health card, when they blackball you, they can see why they blackballed you all the way through. So, okay, looks like we got Katherine back. So I was just kind of highlighting what you're talking about in Ontario. With the health link. So I've had individuals in the past that I know that the health card will say that there's something mentally wrong with them when there's not, and then it doesn't matter where you go, you're gonna get.
But they're even doing this right now to the doctors that are speaking out, like literally, the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms had Dr. Francis Christian from Saskatchewan. I think I posted that. Like they're gaslighting. That's what they're doing. Like
Definitely.
as soon as you're able to prove their agenda or what they did, they will like literally build a mental health case against you. And they do this to discredit you. But what had them so scared, and in some of my audio clips, you can hear them asking me, like their voice is quivering and they're going, "May I ask what you do for a living? Like, why did you come here?" And then when I tell them, like, this isn't okay, they'll proceed to tell me, well, we were just doing what our higher up said. I'm not even making this up. I have an audio clip where the doctor of that hospital said to me, "You do understand we were just doing what our higher ups told us to do, Katherine." And it blew my mind. It's like, so back to my story, they had placed me on this hold, right?
Before you go on, before you cut out, I was gonna ask one question. When they told you that you weren't allowed to leave up until the point that you demanded them show the proof, how long was that?
I was inpatient at that hospital for 5 days straight. And it was the first time I felt what it was like to have no cast on either of my legs. Like, this is 4 broken bones now. Like, I knew the pain of like 2 broken bones in one leg, but then they casted it. And remember, 3 days later, the other one broke. I'm literally laying there. They removed my cast for the whole 5 days I was in there to supposedly work me up, right? Like, biopsies, tests, who knows? And I'm like, you can put my cast back on now because I'm going to book a flight home. I have that right. And what I'm going to do is maybe get a third opinion because I have to no, you can't leave. And I know why they did this because, Jamie, as soon as my CT scan came back there, they knew. They knew. Anybody who looks at my images, you don't even need to be a radiologist. Everything, all of my organs, I'm in big trouble. Like, we're talking pathological fractures all over my rib cage. I have videos in my bladder of precancerous cells. I didn't know what it was at the time. It's only 45 seconds long. But now, having met with doctors that are helping me stay alive behind the scenes, outside of the system, and I will never, ever throw names, and they formed a very powerful alliance, right? It's like, wait a second. You did a CT scan. You see how sick I am. So now it's like, there's a story here. So they had before they placed me on this hold, they did approach me and say, "Will you sign a piece of paper so that we can access your discharge summaries and your clinical notes from Ontario?" I was like, no, I do not consent. I am not signing that paper. It shouldn't matter. I'm here now. I'm in your hospital. You guys can work me up. You have not one single COVID death apparently in your whole Atlantic bubble since this started. The restaurants are open. The nail salons are open in person. You guys have asked me to do a vaccine. I said no, thank you. So why is it that I can't, like, I'm not signing nothing. Like, I'd like to go home. And it was right after that where they literally said to me, you can't leave. And they said, and I said, no, you're going to put my cast back on. Oh, well, it's the weekend. Our casting clinic is not open, Catherine, until Monday. And I looked at them and I'm like, so if there's a car accident, heaven forbid, on a weekend, there's nobody to do casts. You need to put both my casts back on and below the knee so I can actually bend my knees because I'm going to fly home. I'm not driving like I came here. 18 hours in the back seat with a catheter and 2 casts for answers. And you guys want to do me dirty? It's not going to happen. And it was at that point where it pivoted and they placed me on this hold. And I know my stuff because I've had to do it for a relative many years ago. And it's a lot. It's not easy to have somebody formed this way, especially when they're not presenting suicidal, right? So she proceeded to tell me that, and I told her under section 6 point something, I forget what it was, but like it's all documented. And I said to her, it took you 6.5 hours to come back to my bedside and be willing to read me out loud what apparently the 3 reasons are. So I just want to tell you that this is nothing more than forcible confinement because you took, at least for those 6 hours. And I had legal help on speakerphone. My uncle in the room, they're telling him that he's not allowed to record, but they didn't know I was on my iPhone, right? And I'm sitting there going, like, I'm stating and citing all kind of things, but I won't go over all of it. And she proceeds to tell me that apparently reason number 1 was that the patient appears to be guarded and paranoid. Wow. Reason number two, verbatim, was refusing to consent for us to access her clinical notes and discharge summaries from Ontario. And reason number 3, insight was questionable. So I took a deep breath, and the lawyer on the phone that was helping me was a personal girlfriend. She was actually a law student, but they didn't need to know that. I needed to do what I needed to do to stay safe, right? And I knew that my voice alone wouldn't carry weight. They needed to know that I had legal help in Ontario, right? So there's 4 of us, and I said to her, first of all 3 of the reasons that you just listed do not justify executing a mental health form 1A under the Mental Health Act of Canada. None of the 3 you read. But let me debunk the 3 of them. I go to her, what's your name? And she goes, Holly. I go, Holly, what capacity do you work? I'm acting manager. I'm floating the hospital. And I'm like, I didn't ask to speak to an acting manager. I asked to speak with your legal team at this point. So you know what? I said, let me just debunk this for you one at a time. And your hands are shaking, so you might want to sit down. If I was clinically paranoid, I wouldn't be eating your shitty hospital food for 5 days and 4 nights. I'm not guarded because probably by orders from higher above you at administration, y'all have been walking in here in 2s or 3s for the last 24 hours. And as for me not signing consent for you guys to access that, I don't need to. But by you placing me on a hold, you already went and accessed all my shit from Ontario. Because what it is medical kidnapping. So for however long now it takes me to reverse this, you don't need my consent for anything. And they managed to put an injection in my arm because I was in so much pain. And, being moved from the bed to the CT scan machine and whatnot leading up to this, I had 4 broken bones. None of them were secured. So I asked for morphine. And in all my medical charts, they literally will write down that the patient is uncooperative because I refuse to take any pharma. I've been like that for years. This time I asked for it. I know now that morphine comes oral, PRN, and that morphine comes in an IV. It does not come in an intramuscular shot. Like, I won't even go to where my aluminum levels in my hair test that my naturopath ran are right now. Like, I have a whole other can of worms to worry about. But I looked at her and I dispelled all of it. And I said, you guys are liable. You can't do this. You can't just put a patient on a form until you and your legal team and your risk and assessment team figure out what the hell to do with me. Right? Because you can't do this. So she went out of the room had a discussion for about an hour and a half. I don't know, with her higher ups who she talked to. And they came back to my room and told me literally that I was back on voluntary. And that first thing Monday morning, they would be able to put my cast back on so I can make a flight home. They asked me to do a psych assessment. I said, absolutely not, especially not after what you guys just tried to pull. Like, forgive me, but the doctor patient relationship has been fractured. I said to her, pun intended, it's not happening. It's not happening. Like, I know what is going on here, and it's not happening. And at that point, they brought me a clipboard with a piece of paper, and it literally was on letterhead, and it said, I don't remember like verbatim, like I think I sent it to you guys and I can attach it, but it basically said it was jurisdictional bullshit, that if I was to bring any legal action against PI Health or that hospital or its entities therein, that I could only do so in their governing jurisdiction. We know why they do this. We know why they do this, right? I watched it happen with Adam's case. Like, I wasn't like, I knew what they were doing, but in that situation, you have to sign it. But I had more than enough people aware that I was signing it under duress, right? And you can hear her the next day. They casted my feet and my legs without even setting these bones. It was like a big F you farewell, right? Like, how dare you come here and manipulate our system and figure things out? They did not set one of these 4 bones. To this day, I cannot. They knew that if they set my legs in the right place, I would find a way to get up and walk. You're supposed to set a broken ankle in a 90-degree angle, not in a ballerina planter's position, right? And it was just absolutely ridiculous. There was also an instance while I was in that hospital at 3 o'clock in the morning, and my uncle didn't leave my room because there, remember, there was no restrictions. You can have your family there, you can have everything there. So he literally, I sleep light, and the male nurse came in at 3 o'clock in the morning with a shot of heparin. Heparin is a very strong blood thinner. And I said, what is this for? And he said, well, you're immobile, blood clots. I'm like, okay, but at that dosage, that is to treat. It's not a prophylactic, right? And I'm having a CT scan in the morning at 9 a.m. So for 6 hours, well, the doctor wrote it. And you come at 3 a.m., like, get away from me, right? It was just surreal. So I managed to leave and get out of there. When I left and got home, they literally knocked on my door a day later where I was staying at their condo and claimed that they were from Adult Protection Services. Like, the government literally came knocking at my door. And I was like, wow. And I'm like, what can I do for you? And they said, we're concerned that you might not be, coping well. And I said, I came in a car halfway across the country. I'm alive. I obviously have enough help and I'm coping just fine. Well, unless a doctor deems that you're, unfit to make that decision, I guess we'll close the file. But somebody anonymously called from the community because they were concerned. I'm like, concerned about what? There's nothing wrong with me, right? Just a fluke that I have 2 broken legs, right? So I'm here on a holiday. It's Christmas break. I'm going to go home. You need to get away from my door. At that point, they felt I wasn't safe. So I literally got moved to like a hotel room. And that's when a lot of my friends started reaching out to people within our movement. I knew nothing about this at that time. And, Chris did a story on me. He did a live on me, which I am forever grateful for, because it's different when 20, 30,000 people like know your story. It's almost like, what are they can't hurt you, because if you go missing, there's going to be, like, it's just, it was surreal. But I ended up missing my first flight home because they were refusing to give me my medical records, telling me that I had to go through medical department and records department. And I'm like, you can expedite this because I have a flight to catch. So when they gave me 300 pages of my medical records just during those 5 days of hell in that hospital, they did not hide anything. There was no efforts made to hide anything. I think it was because what happened at the Oakville Hospital and the nurse handing me it, I think it might have been a combination of what my doctor wrote, that I had friends and, former clients that were doctors and nurses. They were already suspicious as to why I chose to go there. So I think because they were somewhat afraid that I might have somebody there on the inside They didn't bother to edit any of it at all, like none of it. And on one of the pages, I noticed footnotes. And in those footnotes, there were corrections made. And it was my COVID questions. Anyone who knows me knows that I would have said no to every one of those questions all the way down that list. Like, when they screen you, like, do you have a cough? Do you have pink eye? Do you have a runny nose? Are you sneezing? Do you have fever? All the way down the list, this page was corrected. And it said, corrected from yes to no, corrected from yes to no, corrected from yes to no. So I stayed up all night reading 300 and something pages of my medical records from that hospital. And there was pages where it said, if the patient is suspected that she is recording, that as per charge nurse, her phone is to be taken away. 2-point restraints were ordered for my wrists. Like, I have 2 broken legs. I can't levitate and get off the bed to hurt anybody. Why would you want to restrain a patient that way when they're already in that state physically, right? On another page, like, it said no next of kin. So I'm like, wow, like, can you say marked COVID death? So you were trying to, like, force me to do surgery here, medically strip me of my own rights by placing me on a bogus form that I forced you guys to flip really quick. And then I'm trying to, like, get safe, and you're realizing all of this. So I don't know how or how many followers had reached out, but I managed to connect at one point with the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, and we had a conversation, and nothing came of it really, because I already had my plan and my flight booked and everything like figured out. So I came back here to Ontario, and when I came back here, I knew that I have to just approach this now outside of the system. Like, I'm done. No lawyer, no lawyer would want to touch things like this back then at that time. They just weren't taking on cases like this. I have emails back and forth with CTV news reporter Avis Favreau, and you might want to edit that out. I don't know if I'm allowed to keep it in, but like, if I was to drop everything, they would nuke every account before I could finish dropping everything. She literally emailed with me back and forth, collected evidence, and then tells me that she can't run my story. And I'm like, you have won Grammy Awards. You are renowned for covering and writing articles, nothing other than medical errors. Like, what do you mean you can't run this, right? I now know why the mainstream media is not willing to depict what's really happening. I also ended up getting flooded, and it started very gradually with other people having a similar story. The reality of it is, our PCR tests, if you ask my opinion, like, it all intertwines. Like, they intentionally did this to people, but they didn't count on people actually being able to figure it out, or to go to the lengths that I chose to go to fight for answers, or to fight for the truth, or to just at one point go through the process of collecting evidence, right? So I ended up speaking with a few reporters. One was from Rebel, one was from Bright Lights News. In general, like, I got some really good advice. Like, moving forward, you make sure you document every phone appointment, every in-person appointment, record it with every doctor. So when I got back to Ontario, I knew I couldn't find a new family doctor. The narrative seemed to be that without a family doctor, it's not uncommon to lose blood work, or for results to go missing, or errors to happen, because you're bouncing from specialist to specialist with no family doctor. At that point, I purposely went and looked for a specific one, and he used to be the walk-in doctor in my neighborhood. I took my kid to this, like, I knew, when you have that relationship, and I found out that his walk-in clinic closed down, and he had his own family practice. So I approached him, and he called me back, and I said, well, according to social media and your advertisements, you're accepting new patients. I believe a lot may have been overlooked. And what I would like is for a family doctor to review everything and see if and where we need, how do we move next? He said that he would agree to do so, but tells me that a lot of people are dying before we can figure it out, Catherine. And I'm like, wow. So I agreed to let him take it on. But what I didn't know is he left me as an unrostered patient, which means formally they are not tied to you, right? So their problem now was, how can I find somebody to remove my cast so that my functional medicine doctor can start with the frequency treatments to try to slow down the pathogens in the bone marrow, right? So Credit Valley Hospital refused. They tried to tell me to return back to Oakville. I said, that's not happening. I asked him to throw it to UHN since I had specialists at Toronto Western. He said that they cannot do it, and ended up finding a Hamilton clinic way out in the middle of nowhere, not affiliated with the hospital, to remove my casts. I took my roommate with me. She recorded the whole thing. After they removed my casts, they sent me for x-rays. And when they called us back, he was astounded at the way that the bones looked. And he says to me, you can hear it in the audio clip, like, they didn't set your bones in PI before they sent you on your way back here. I'm like, no, clearly they didn't, right? And he's like, well, I'd like you to see a surgeon here in Hamilton. And I'm like, why in Hamilton? All the other hospitals told me I have to stay within my postal code. And yet you guys are willing to do this in Hamilton? And after I left the room in my wheelchair, he pulled my roommate aside and he says, she's not aware of this, but one of the hospitals wrote that there was possible fictitious disorder. A fictitious disorder is like Munchausen by proxy, almost like where a patient is exaggerating things. And she says to him, I used to do OHIP billing and I've known her since high school. She's not making it up. She's very sick and you're violating like her HIPAA alone. Like, you cannot be discussing this after she leaves the room with me. And it became very evident. So you can hear me re-enter the room. And I called him on it. I said, you don't have consent to disclose anything, let alone things I'm not aware of, with my support person I brought to my meeting, my appointments. And he says, well, it's implied consent. I said, yeah, while I'm sitting in the same room with her, I left the room and you nefariously pulled her aside to ask her questions like, how long has she known me? Was she aware they wrote this on my charts? That's not okay. So I said, this meeting is over, and we left. Like, she pushed my wheelchair out. We left so fast. The next day, I recorded it. The same doctor calls me, apologizing profusely, saying that he made a grave error and he shouldn't have pulled her aside to say those things to her behind my back. At this point in the game, I now have 2 broken legs. I know I'm not going to get any medical help. I just need to buy time, right? So I actually had filed with the CPSO and they found no wrongdoing, but they have no problem, by the way, opening and aggressively investigating ethical doctors right now that are speaking out. Go figure. So we also filed with the Patient Ombudsman of Ontario. And their only mandate is to audit hospital errors, right? Well, I filed with her December 4th. December 18th, they closed my file with no investigation. They didn't want to see the evidence I've collected. They didn't want to look at the pictures I took of what the doctors wrote behind my back. And she dies in a car crash. I'm not trying to suggest that it was because of my case specifically, because I imagine she probably had so many other cases like this, and she probably just couldn't have been bought off, right? And that's just what happens. And now that you're in real big trouble, so you start exploring, like, what else do I do about it? Well, if I'm screwed and I'm only going to prolong life, and I have a really good team now of integrated medical people involved, why not just bring this to light the best you can? And there's healing in helping others heal, right? So it happened organically, where dozens and hundreds of patients per week started gravitating towards me. And then, the following grew stronger on social media, and I would have to delegate it. Like, if you're a first responder, you need to reach out to this person. I had everything, even RNs coming to me, like, my work's trying to mandate this. Can you help me navigate it? And I'm like, I can't give legal advice, right? So I started clumping it. Like, you know what? The frontline nurses can help you if you're an RN. And, the more I spoke with people that were pharmacists and that worked on the inside of the system, they're now trying to leave, like medical professionals, it started becoming more and more evident that this is not in my head. Like, they literally did this to me. It was intentional. And they almost mock you. Like, what are you going to do about it? Right? You can't, even if I found a lawyer, you still need a favorable judge. Like, people don't understand the level of judicial corruption that exists. So what I started doing is circling back to every doctor that was complicit in my case. And you can hear me on some audio clips where I'm asking them for their indemnification number. Like, I did one meet and greet where the nurse practitioner literally asked me if I was part of any active current lawsuits. Like, literally, she said, Catherine, are you part of any active lawsuits currently? Like, what kind of question is that to ask a new patient? Is that normal for intake? Like, so I figured that they were on to it. But at the same time, um, I had started like just having my discs reread outside of the country. And it was across the board. Like, not one single one of my tests were accurate. And then more people started telling me that they had the same issue, or that they couldn't get proper medical help because they were refusing to take, this jab that they're offering right now. And it just started where it naturally, like, you're collecting testimonials and testimonials and testimonials. And as sick as I am, it's empowering and healing when I'm able to help another person navigate so that they don't end up in that same situation. But I literally had doctors refusing to give me their indemnification numbers. And you can hear them pretending they didn't know what that was. And I'm like, well, I'm not asking for your CPSO number because you're corrupt as shit governing body that is giving these directives for you to run out the clock on people's lives. Then they come in sick on death's door. They die in there. Your PCR test that you're running at cycles way above where it should be ran is going to almost always produce a false positive, right? So now you're going to get financial incentive to call a cancer death a COVID death. And you're doing this to thousands of people. And I'm not done with you guys yet. So I asked them for indemnification numbers, not their CPSO numbers. This directly correlates to their personal insurance. Like, they have to have their own insurance, not just like their license is protected by, let's say, the CPSO. So my issue now is, I know I'm never going to be able to bring something like accountability against a hospital. Like, hospitals were granted, and a lot of people don't realize this, they were granted blanket immunity from any and all liability due to the pandemic. So that gives them carte blanche to literally let people die. And we have nurses on the inside, and our only eyes and ears that were on the inside, they're now pushing them out. And every medical staff that they're going to hire in has to sign an NDA, which is a non-disclosure agreement. And it's like, how are people not realizing what's happening here? And there's nothing independent. There's nothing. Like, for a patient in my position laying there this terrified, there is nothing. So when I advocate and I help other people who come at me in my DMs to not end up in the same shoes I ended up in, I tell them, like, they're telling you to call patient relations and file a complaint. But you need to understand that the patient relations department within that hospital is not third party contracted in. So the same person that signs that doctor's paycheck that you feel did you wrong signs their paychecks as well. So then you can't go to human rights because they're rewriting their whole mandate now. You can't get a patient advocate because there's no organizations that exist within Canada that are not federally funded. So it's like, I'm just one person and I'm trying to do it the best I can, but the need is there, right? And I think it's beautiful that I managed to find a way to live this long, because we're going to have lawyers coming out of the woodworks, and we're going to have nurses being fired. We're going to have people that know how to navigate the system the way I can and the things I know. So when people ask me, like, how do you give so much of your time helping complete strangers? You don't charge for your time. It's like, if I can help one person and empower them, and then they help another person, then so be it. But it's so disheartening to watch people not be able to exercise their rights, or to watch a big part of our population not be able to discern what the difference is between a directive and a law. I had a patient that called me out of the blue. I think one of the guys that films for Druthers News sent her my way. And she's like, I'm giving birth at Credit Valley, and they're telling me my husband can't come in because he's not vaccinated. I'm like, okay. So it's not a law, right? It's like you need to ask them why every hospital has different rules. And at the same time, who's really going to stop your husband when our mayor announced that the police will not attend any vaccine passport calls, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a hospital, whether it's a school, they're not going to come. So you're telling me the 23-year-old kid at the front door that the security company like Paladin employs is going to stop your husband from coming into your child's birth? Like, I just can't wrap my mind around how scared people are just to assert their rights, right? And I don't know, like, how to move forward from here, but I know that I want to bring it forward and do all of them justice, because I also applied for freedom of information and they're refusing to give it to me. And my cousin used to work for Statistics Canada, so I know the dynamics of how that should work. And I'm like, I want to know for the calendar year of 2020 how many actual death certificates had to be corrected after the autopsies. I'm not asking for patient specifics. I'm not asking for names. I just want to know the numbers, right? And they won't release it. They won't. They just won't, because people are starting to figure out that this is intentional. This is literally intentional. And as for, like, is there a virus? Sure. But is this pandemic is political. And it's because I think my initial doctor that dropped me from her care and wrote those things about me followed me because of the Ontario Clinic Connect and the way that their internal computer systems are created, right? Like, I was a thorn in my government side long before I got sick. I was the mom that pulled my kid from the school system six and a half years ago, right? I was the one who would go on behalf of Peel Poverty Action Group and meet with Hazel McCallion. Like, I've always been that person. So I think she almost knew I'd figure it out. But there's also, like, they're not doing it to everybody. There's a certain demographic that they're doing this to. And I don't know how to allow that to sit in my soul. Like, it doesn't sit well in my soul. Like, how do we bring this to light in a bigger way?
Yeah,
Like, you lose.
I think that's what we're all trying to do. We've come up with this incredible wall that's in front of us, and we're all starting to acknowledge. Some of us have been awake for a little while, some of us have longer, some of us are just waking up, but we're starting to realize this incredible wall that's been put in front of us that is all political. Whether you believe that COVID exists or not, it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter whether you wear a mask, don't wear a mask, get vaccinated, don't get vaccinated, business owner, not a business owner. We're all starting to realize that we're up against a big system. And like you're talking about, dedicating free time to help individuals get empowered to stand up. That's what we're all about right now. I also do a lot of, give a lot of my time to anyone that's willing to stand up, because this is going to take all of us. And what we're up against is we're not just trying to, beat one act. If you get charged or anything else, or get a ticket and you're going to court, that's not what this is about. We, as Canadian people, we are up against the most heinous thing that we've ever seen, and it's going through our businesses, our healthcare, our education, and it's just right across our country. So the one thing that's happening is most people don't know what to do. They're terrified. And that's where it takes individuals like yourself telling the story and empowering people on how to stand up, what to do, being open. Phone me, call me, talk to me. I will walk you through this. I will give you anything that I know, the best that I can, and try and push forward. So this is where we all have to come together to do this.
I think Jamie, at this point in at this stage where we're at right now, a lot of people are realizing, and they're coming out of that cognitive dissonance in a state of shock. And a lot of people in this movement, okay, that have been awake for a long time, they forget that they need kindness right now. They literally just realize, like, I have double vaccinated friends of mine that are refusing to do their kids, or literally walking away from their clinics and saying, I'll just see patients at my house, because they feel like, when you wake up from it and you realize that your government has literally pulled the wool over your eyes, what they need is kindness so that they can come onto the other side and our numbers strengthen. And people forget that there needs to be a component of love and compassion to these people, because it wasn't their fault. It's like we're seeing Stockholm syndrome across our country as these people are awakening right now. And I'm going to touch on it, and feel free if you want to leave it in or not leave it in. And I don't know, I haven't talked with you too, but I know, like, Kim and I know a lot of the same people. There seems to be a divide right now.
Yep.
Within our own movements. And I'm not going to sit here and name names, and I won't give my opinion. I've made it clear to both sides. Teresa from Huff's Gym is near and dear to my heart. She has literally lifted me out of bed. Like, you know what I'm saying? I have some serious, like, I have an army of angels around me that surround me and are carrying me through, whether it's providing resources, practical help, fundraising, etc. And there should never be, like, I've made it clear that, and I said it in the beginning of this podcast, Chris did my story and made 20, 30,000 people aware of what was happening, right? But at the same time, right now, there seems to be a lot of ego, and it needs to go, because everybody needs to unite now. And I made it clear, and I think she's one of the other ones that has managed to stay neutral. I'm not going to pick a side, because there should not be any internal politics within our cause itself when we're fighting against internal politics to start with. And if that divide hadn't happened a few months ago and all of us stood up right now, that table would flip. But there's not enough, like, I want to see unity. Like, if someone said, what's your dying wish? I want to see what unity should be like. This is time to collaborate. And a lot of people, it's almost like they're scared. Oh, if we let her in to help us, it steals our thunder. Or, this conflicts with what we're trying to do. Or some people, like, it doesn't matter what your reasons are. We need those numbers now, because the strongest ones are left, or they would not be pulling these kind of measures, right? And our government is aware of that. But don't think that they're also not aware that somehow, somewhere, a rift has happened within our cause.
Now, to add to that, I believe that they are responsible for such rift, and we are making such breaking ground, and we are wreaking havoc on their entire plan. We weren't supposed to get these vaccine passports till the spring. We have them now, so we've wreaked havoc, and this is what they're purposely doing. They're trying to create wedges within our own movement. It's time for all of us within the movement to take that wool over our eyes and realize what the enemy is doing to us, putting us against each other, so we are disorganized. And I couldn't agree with you 100% more. We all need to come together. It doesn't matter, all personal differences aside, all egos aside, brace yourself, run forward. Whatever method you choose, so be it. As long as we're all have the same goal in mind, this is where we really got to unify, definitely.
Absolutely. I agree with you. It's very disheartening to see that occurred, because I have a lot of love for both sides. I don't think there should be a side like that. And I told some people that, like, whether they're organizers at Queen's Park, whether they're, touring, whether they're nurses, I don't care what organization you're from. I'm not going to take sides. I'm going to keep one leg on one side and one leg on the other side, because that line between my legs, it's not supposed to be there in the first place. It's not the way this is supposed to work. It won't work. It won't work. No matter how good our intentions are, if we don't all find a way to just get past it and work together collectively, like, there's a lot of powerful people that, whether they bring finances, whether they bring the knowledge, whether they can bring the numbers, if we all work together, it would be over. Like, I say that wholeheartedly, it would be done. Like it would be done. Like the whole narrative would just be blown to pieces. But nobody is working collaboratively. And that's what I think, like, that's what I think the biggest problem is right now. Like, how do we move forward? How do we bring the change that we want to see?
No, you make such a lovely point. Really, what we're looking at is basically they're using war type tactics against us, and we see it for what it is, and not fall for these easy bait, just easy pitfalls. So I completely agree with you on that one. So unification, absolutely. If you don't mind,
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna open it up to some questions right now because we don't want to keep you forever. We know that this has been a really stressful experience for you, and again, we really appreciate you going into full detail with us and going over everything. So we just have a few questions for you that we'd love to hear the answers of. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, Kim, did you want to give out the first question?
Yeah, Catherine, I'd like to know why you think this happened to you and anything that could have prevented it along the way, because this has been going on for months and months. So, your input on that.
I think that the reason this happened to me is because, like, I'm going to just talk completely, like, openly here, because it feels like a safe space, and I know that hundreds, if not thousands, might see this, but this is what I figured out. These doctors have directives to follow. The directives come from above them. They have a choice to either help their patients, right, and do what they swore an oath to, or follow their directives and protect their licenses. That's the reality of what it comes down to, right? And we see more and more numbers of them standing up against their governing bodies. But my issue is with the CPSO because that's where it's coming from, right? And if we could collectively find a way to bring it against them, then it would, like, it happened to me because I fell under a certain demographic. My family doctor literally threw me under the bus by writing this. So every time I try to advocate for a patient, whether I'm on a call with them, with their own hospital, their own doctors, I always tell each family I've worked with, pull your records, look over them with a fine tooth comb, get your discs, right? Get them. They tried to create Pocket Health at the beginning of this, which is an online digital portal. And I've shown you before and after pictures where they've removed my specialist, like where it'll say ordering physician CT scan, Dr. So and so. It now says Dr. Unknown. Like, I don't have the silver discs that I can pop in a disc reader and have reread in Germany or in Florida. Like, you can't be removing doctor. But it was created that way because the average person is not aware that they can hold their ground and say, well, I know for $30, I have the right to my physical images on a disc. I don't want to consent to be part of your online digital pocket health, right? So why it happened to me specifically, um, because they were afraid of a lawsuit. I'm a walking lawsuit. And the reality of it is, if any doctor formally diagnosed me, it would throw all of the others under the bus. Now, why they did this to a certain demographic is, like I tell people all of the time, your health card, your birth certificate, like nothing is private anymore. It is an illusion of privacy that we have as citizens in our country, right? So I think that they knew that I knew what was happening. They did this to thousands of people. They literally, it was planned out, right? And when I saw it written in black and white that Catherine believes something sinister is going on, I'm not an uneducated woman, right? I'm not stupid enough to say to a doctor what I'm saying, like at this stage in my game, right? Yet they knew that I caught on, and they were writing things behind my back for that reason. And that's why I think it snowballed the way it did. Another reason was they knew that they had liability, like they were free of all liability. Our government has literally allowed them to commit mass genocide. If this isn't genocide, I don't know what is. Like, I really don't know how to make people understand that they are killing people, literally, right? Like literally killing people. And I know that some people believe this virus is real, some people don't. I'm personally telling you, like, if you go into a hospital, the way that they're going to treat you is almost guaranteed going to kill you. If not of a virus, of like your kidneys will fail. They throw you on remdesivir, throw you on a ventilator, and that's it, right? They're not allowed to run an IV with vitamin drips in a hospital. Like, Kim knows because I've shown her some pictures. I literally have a nurse who will come to my house once a week and hang a bag of saline, like off record, no OHIP cash, like I trust her because somebody high up in this movement sent her to me and I trust her. But she's running vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc, glutathione, vitamin B12, selenium for absorption. You can't get these in the hospital. So what they created was like, let's make a system that's digital. And then because we're going to project on the televisions that everything is so freaking full in the hospitals, we can run the clock out on them. By the time they come to us, they're like end stage sick, right? We can just put them in the hospital and do a PCR test. But we're going to run it at a 45 cycle. So it's going to say positive. Or we'll swab them maybe in surgery against their will, or we'll swab them after they die, and we'll just write it off as a COVID death, even though we know it's not. This increased their numbers, which allowed their lockdowns. It was just, it's pre-programmed and it's pre-planned. I know that I'm preaching to the choir here tonight, but that's why I feel, Kim, it went the way it went for that, like that it snowballed that big. But what they didn't bank on is that inheritingly, I'm an analytical person. I have a background in psych. I've been doing advocacy for almost a decade, formally and informally. And they didn't bank on the fact that I was going to find loopholes, even if that meant traveling. When they were appalled. Like at Credit Valley, like, oh, you went to Buffalo and got an MRI? How did you get across the border? And I'm like, anyone can get across the border. They tell you they don't want you to know that you can, but you can, right? So it happened to me to this extent because I figured out what they were doing and I made them aware that I was documenting it and that I had undisputable evidence. I didn't want to make them aware, but when it comes down to safety and you need to get out of a hospital safe, and that's the one card you have to play. It's like, yeah, look, I have this and this and this on my iPhone. I've emailed it to safe people. Even when I was in that situation in PI, if I didn't have the knowledge I hold and that quick wit and being aware, I don't think I would have made it back here. I really don't believe I would have made it back here if I didn't know exactly what to say and how to respond to that. And before I left, because I knew that that could happen, I made sure that other people had copies of everything. I'm not talking iCloud where they can literally go in and screw with it. Like I took it old school. Like, USB keys and copies of it on USB keys. And then those USB keys, like in multiple different households. And I just basically made them aware, right? Like even at the CPSO level, like what you guys are doing is criminal. They're interfering with the patient-doctor relationship. And they're putting physicians in the position where they literally have to pick between protecting their license and actually helping their patients. And I'm not going to lie, out of the 26 doctors I encountered, I met two that genuinely wanted to help me, but you could tell that their hands were tied by administration. Because at the end of the day, there's a CEO. It's a business. Hospitals are businesses, guys. That's why there's a CEO. There's a bottom line. There's a reputation to protect, right? So not everybody, though, can figure that part out. So that's why I feel it went as far as it went. They set it up to allow them to be able to do this to people. And it was intentionally to bring up their death count.
That's really that's such a good point, especially with the way that you're explaining the whole cycle of it. It's like you from the surface you want to believe these people still have your best interest at heart, but when you see the temptation to, like when everyone, are they really thinking as a community anymore, or are they thinking about individuals trying to save their own ass? You know
I
what I
think they're
mean?
just
Like when
trying.
they're
I think they're trying to save their own ass.
yeah,
And like, we're seeing more and more doctors speak up, but it's like, if you ask me, why now? Why now? Why didn't you do this 6 months ago? Why now? Like, do you get what I'm saying? Like, you didn't have a conscience then.
yeah. No, it's I feel like it's until it's at someone's front step that they really start to kind of care about it and take it to that next level. I just a quick question. You had mentioned before about lawyers not really wanting to kind of touch this and stuff like that. Have you gotten a lawyer? Oh, I think she disappeared on us. Oh, well, no worries. She'll probably be back in just a moment here. I think she's had a couple connection issues. Um, But in the meantime, we're going to ask her kind of, if she's had any kind of lawyers approach her, willing to maybe represent her. If she's filed a complaint with the CPSO, as she was saying before, she felt that that was kind of a waste of her time. So maybe, probably not, but just out of curiosity there. And have a couple other questions for her just to see if we have some time for it. We'll see if she's able to pop back on here. But as you can see, like just the level of corruption is staggering. And if this is just one person coming to us with their experience, you just imagine how many other, probably tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, how many surgeries are backlogged? How many people are put on ventilators? All these things that were so unnecessary, and the the carte blanche just level of hospitals were written off of any liability. I mean, like that's just a blank check for who knows what they could do. So it's a terrifying experience. Um, I know myself, we don't have kids yet, and we were looking at having them, and I'm torn because I'm just like, we're not vaxxed, and my husband's not, and if this is the case of trying to stay the not allowed in the birth room, then it's terrifying. So yeah, okay, so we got Katherine back, so we'll wait for her to plug in there. Oh, there we go, perfect. Good to have you back. So
Yeah, I overheard. Yeah, I thanks. I just overheard a little bit of what you were saying at the end. Like, and
yeah,
you're so right. As unvaccinated people right now, I feel that we need to put something. I don't know how I'm going to bring it together, but we need to put something in place. Like, I have screenshot after screenshot after screenshot. Like, this one mom said to me, can you help me, please? Because urgent care in Mississauga on Queensway won't see my daughter for a dislocated shoulder because she's 17 and she's not vaccinated. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Right? Or I have people coming to me saying, my employment lawyer thinks it will strengthen our case.
damn. So yeah, I can tell that her connection's a little bit choppy there. So what she was saying though was, like I said, there's multiple people that are having these kind of things. There's this lady named I can't remember her name, Monique something. We'll link it in the description because she's a fantastic person to follow though on Instagram. But she gets messages all the time, every day upon day, of people who work in hospitals, work in EMS, work in different situations and what they're seeing on their side of things, people who've experienced stuff, and usually they want to remain anonymous, but still it's just like the things on the inside, the things on the outside, all of it showing that like the veneer of what's happening is it is starting to crumble, but it's also so thick that it's hard to imagine how deep we're going to have to dig in order to really excise this societal tumor. But be prepared to. We're going to have to dig pretty deep, but it's going to be worth it. Nothing worth fighting for is ever easy. It's always the hard road that's best, but it's a deep one. But I mean, we're going to be chipping at this together. So, like she was saying before as well too, there's going to be lots of things that are going to try to find a way to divide you. I mean, look at everything that's happened with these jab mandates and how it's torn families apart and stuff like that. That was one of the last bastions that they had to dig into, was the family, because those are the people that you wanted to be with at times like this. And now they're trying to tear them apart, and it's like everyone feels like they're alone, and but we can see even just from this, you put your story out there, you're going to get people messaging you with their stories as well too. So we're all in this. We really, I'm going to take their statement. We're all in this together on this side,
Right.
and that's really what it's come down to. So
yeah, I couldn't agree more. So it looks like we may be getting Katherine back. We are getting fairly lengthy here, so
yes.
It's almost to wrap it up. We were trying to ask you a couple of questions, Katherine, but how about you tell us about you have a GoFundMe account, do you not?
I do
Okay,
right now,
perfect.
because everything I'm doing treatment wise is outside of pocket, and I'm not working right now, right? And that's the other thing. They literally, it was like, I do have one, and it was created by a friend of mine several months ago, and it kind of just sits there. Like, I don't plug it. When it picks up, it picks up, but then it loses momentum. My goal is $25,000. Um, I was offered to go into California, so my story reached across the border, and I had somebody reach out to me saying that we can help you, and I'm like, I can't afford that, right? Like, how did you guys, and how do you like, it's at the regenerative clinic, and the founder of Children's Health Defense is really close with the founder of this clinic, and basically they do stem cell treatments, and they had booked me in for the 4th of October, emails confirmed and everything, and I just didn't meet my goal, right? I'm not concerned how I'm going to get across the border, because I know our snowbirds can fly me in no problem right now, right? There's that whole freedom flights thing. And I didn't meet the financial criteria, right? For Dr. Mark Galili, and he's amazing what he's doing right now. And he's helping people from all across the world that are literally been left to die. That's the reality of it. So I'm primarily raising funds right now for the treatments I need, and to get across the border for that help. But I also recently learned that there's something starting up here. I don't want to say too much, because it's still in like, it hasn't been, it is not launched yet, but we all have a lot of mutual friends on the inside, and I know that there's the potential of getting the help I need here, because a lot of the woke doctors within our movement have formed an alliance, right? And we have tens of thousands of medical staff being let go. So I would rather do that treatment here if it takes off the ground in time. But right now I'm just raising funds to try to get the treatment I need, because it's systemic. Like, I have co-infections in my blood that just won't clear, where Life Labs literally will tell me one thing, and then I've done blood work privately, like on the down low, and it says something conflicting, which like literally warrants a prescription from Shoppers Drug Mart label with my name. And you're looking at these hospitals going, so I have a blood infection, borderline septic, and you guys missed this at Life Labs. But it's like what Jamie touched on, like, your health card is blacklisted. That's it. And I won't go down that rabbit hole because we don't have the time, but it's so interconnected right now. And I know that in order to get any help safely, it needs to be outside of our system, and that I don't have the financial affluency to sustain that, right? So yeah, I do have that.
Well, we're going to link it below, and we're just asking any of our viewers that if I don't know who wouldn't be moved by what you've said, but if they can, with all compassion, please donate to her GoFundMe. You're an amazing person, and the bravery that it takes to come forward with all this, the level in which you've gathered the information. This is not just something hearsay. This is documented malpractice, and you deserve to be I don't want to say I don't deserve to be compensated for this, but it takes a community to run a community, and if we're going to have strong leaders that are going to come out and say these types of things and take those risks, I'd like to see our you be supported in an adequate way to keep you moving and to keep you in a state of comfort. So yes, absolutely.
I appreciate that so much, Jessica. I really, really do. It's a disgusting system. I was just able to dismantle it and to collect evidence along the way. And I don't, if my story becomes even one other person's survival guide, then it wasn't in vain, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know how else to say it other than that. Like it's not something that, and I don't want other people to feel like when they're being gaslit, like, or to have to go through it and feel like it's only happening to them, because it's not. And I was born to be the glitch in this matrix, and if that's my role in it until God decides it's my time to go, then so be it. But I told them way back when I came back from Buffalo, which was July of 2020, before I went to PI, before any of the other effery, I am not going to die quietly, right? Mainstream media doesn't want to run my story. That's okay. But I'm not going to take this to my grave with me, because if you can't fix the system, and I'm so tired of people telling me, you need a lawyer, you need this, you need that. No, I really don't. Because realistically, the system has been broken, and the medical system in itself has needed a revamp for decades. It's just that this pandemic lit up all those dark corners. That's all. And no lawyer is going to help you win this, because for them to do that would literally be suicide. Like, because they would never have another client. If they fix the medical system because of my testimony, let's say, then they're out of work, right? Think about this. Like, and their obligation doesn't lay to their client, their obligation lays to their crown. Like, I won't even go there, but there's so many levels of this. And you need to understand the judicial system. So you have to pick, when you're in my situation, and protect your energy. Where are you going to allocate that energy, and where are you going to put it, right? And for me, it was like, I don't need a lawsuit. I don't need a lawyer. What I need is resources. What I need is to find ways to stay alive. What I need is to put my story out there as huge as I can to make other people come forward, because there is strength in numbers, right? So if you can't fix a system, then expose the shit out of it, right? Dismantle it on all levels.
Yep.
And it might
Exactly.
change something 10 years down the road. It probably won't be in my lifetime. I'm not naive. I know that this is advanced and I'm really, really sick, but I'm not dying. I'm healing. And you keep telling yourself that daily. Your cells literally listen to you. You can alkaline your body. No disease can thrive in an alkaline body, right? Like, you make sure you manage your pH levels. There are things you can take that will literally slow this down. And when they were throwing medications to me, like they wanted me to take Oxyneo twice a day, long lasting, breakthrough pain Percocet, orthopedic surgeon prescribing morphine, blood thinners, anti-inflammatories. And it's like, well, no, I don't need a blood thinner. I can take turmeric, right? I don't need to take narcotics for pain. I can take arnica and cannabis. I don't need to, like, there are ways that you can literally not only slow down organ failure and any disease, but there are ways, and they don't want people to know about these ways. But the average person does not have access to those things, right? Like, some of it has been offered pro bono, and some of it I'm paying literally out of pocket. So it's not easy. And it's so disheartening, because they know people can't afford it. And they know that people are going to just die, which lines up with their agenda. That was their end goal to start with, right?
Yes.
Okay, so wow, this is quite the powerful episode. We're a little lengthy. I'm sure we could keep you talking for hours. We're all really good talkers here too, as well. But I think we're gonna wrap it up at this point. We could probably go on for quite a while. So maybe later on we'll get some updates from you and bring you back to fill in any updates that may happen with you. Thank you so much for being here, Katherine. You're really presenting the story as it is, raw, For some people, it might be a little disturbing, but this is the reality of our world at this moment. And the only way we can, present it to anybody is very truthfully and honestly. And you've done that. And what a powerful message, and what a powerhouse you are. Good job in all your stand. And, I'm glad to know you and meet you and hear your story. That was very powerful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much for allowing me to tell my story and making it feel safe and comfortable. And for everything you guys are doing. Yeah, for everything you guys are doing also. I appreciate every one of you guys.
Why, thank you. So, I mean, I don't think we could end it on a better note than that. So, everybody have a wonderful night, and we'll see you again in a week.
Thank you so very much. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.